Welcome to Reddit's For Sleep, where every story is your escape into calm. If this video helps you relax or drift off tonight, gently tap that like button so we can keep making more just like this. And if you haven't already, subscribe and let us tuck you in with a fresh hour of stories every single night. Story 1. My husband's silence was louder than any argument. It's strange how silence can weigh heavier than shouting. I met Evan in college at a small liberal arts school tucked in the forests of Vermont. He was one of those people you notice even in a crowded room, not because he was loud, but because he radiated this calm confidence that drew people in. He had deep-set hazel eyes that seemed to study you, like he was searching for the story under your skin. After 10 years of marriage, I thought I knew everything about him. But then came the summer of 2024. We were living in a cozy, craftsman-style house on a quiet street just outside Asheville, North Carolina. The kind of neighborhood where people waved as they walked their dogs and kids left their bikes in the driveway without worry. Evan worked remotely as a UX designer for a Seattle-based tech firm, and I taught literature at the local high school. Life had settled into a comforting rhythm. Each morning we'd sit on the porch, drinking coffee. I liked mine strong and black. He always added a little oat milk and cinnamon. In the evenings, we cooked together, chopping vegetables shoulder to shoulder, sharing quiet jokes about the students in my AP English class or the irritating client calls he had to endure. After dinner, we'd curl up on the sofa under a soft gray throw, sometimes watching a documentary, other times reading our own books in a companionable silence. It felt steady, predictable, safe. And maybe that's why I didn't notice the shift right away. At first, it was subtle. Evan stopped asking about my day. His texts became clipped, functional. Instead of his usual, "Good night, beautiful," at bedtime, I got a flat night. He'd linger longer in his office after work, the door closed. When I passed by, I'd sometimes hear the murmur of his voice, low and quick, like he didn't want anyone to overhear. One Saturday evening, I came into the kitchen to find him standing by the window, staring at the darkened backyard with his phone in hand. His thumb hovered over the screen like he wasn't sure whether to send a message or delete it. "Everything okay?" I asked softly, trying to keep my voice light. He startled, turning too quickly. "Yeah, just work stuff." But he wouldn't meet my eyes. That night, as I lay awake listening to the soft whir of the ceiling fan, I told myself I was imagining things. 10 years together. Of course, there would be ebbs and flows. He was under pressure at work. Everyone said the tech industry was brutal these days. But you know when something in your bones feels wrong? A week later, my friend Dana came over for wine. Dana is blunt in the way only a friend of 15 years can be. She has this way of cutting through my carefully constructed excuses. "You're not yourself," she said, curling her legs under her on the couch and swirling her Cabernet. "What's going on with you and Evan?" I forced a smile. "He's just stressed. It'll pass." Dana raised an eyebrow. "Lena, don't gaslight yourself." That night, after Dana left, I found myself standing outside Evan's office door. The light under the door flickered. I could hear faint typing. I raised my hand to knock, but didn't. Instead, I went back to bed and stared at the ceiling until sleep finally dragged me under. A few nights later, I woke around 2 a.m. to find Evan sitting on the edge of the bed, his phone glowing faintly in the dark. "Evan," I whispered. My voice felt small in the stillness. He jumped slightly and shoved the phone under the pillow. "Go back to sleep, babe." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to remind myself of all the years he'd been loyal, steady, good. But in that moment, the hollow feeling in my stomach made my whole body ache. The next day, while Evan was out for a run, I did something I'd never done before. I checked his phone. It was on the charger, face down, passcode already entered. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But dread mixed with curiosity is a powerful thing. The first thing I saw were the notifications. Texts from someone saved as Alyssa. My chest tightened. I opened the thread. It wasn't explicit. No sexts, no photos. But there was intimacy there. In the small things, late-night confessions, inside jokes, little moments of shared vulnerability. Wish I could talk to you all night like this. You're the only person who gets it. It was enough to make my hands shake. I put the phone back exactly as I found it and sat in the kitchen staring at the tile floor until Evan came home. That night, I made blueberry pancakes for dinner. It's his favorite. But when I placed the plate in front of him, he didn't smile like he used to. Thanks, he mumbled. We ate in silence. The clink of forks against plates felt deafening. Lena, he said finally, his voice careful. Yeah? You're quiet tonight. I looked up at him, searching for the man I'd loved for over a decade. So are you, I said softly. Later, after he went upstairs to shower, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in hand. I didn't plan it. My fingers moved before my brain could catch up. I called Alyssa. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Her voice was soft, hesitant. Hi, I said. This is Lena, Evan's wife. Silence. Then, oh my God. To her credit, she didn't hang up. She didn't deny anything. She sounded young, too young. She admitted they'd met through work. She swore it hadn't turned physical. I didn't know he was married, she whispered. He said he was separated. When I hung up, my hands were numb. That night, I didn't confront Evan. I needed time to think. The next morning, he came into the kitchen in his usual hoodie and sweatpants, hair still damp from the shower. Morning, he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. Morning. My voice didn't shake, though my chest felt like it was splintering. We had coffee together like we always did, but it felt different, like we were actors on a stage, reciting lines we'd said 1,000 times before. That evening, I couldn't take it anymore. As he sat scrolling on his phone, I asked quietly, "How long?" His head snapped up, his face drained of color. "Lena." "How long, Evan?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked like a man trying to swallow words that refused to go down. "I'm so sorry," he said finally. And then, nothing. Not an explanation, not a defense, just silence. That night, I moved into the guest room. Evan didn't fight me on it. He brought me a blanket and said, "You deserve better." We've been in this strange limbo ever since. It's been 3 months now. He's still in the house. We share meals sometimes. We even laugh occasionally. But something between us broke. And I don't know if it can be fixed. Sometimes I think about the early days. How he once wrote me letters that made me cry. How he held my hand in movie theaters, even after years together. Now, his silence is louder than any argument. And at night, when I lie awake, in the guest room, I wonder if this quiet is his way of saying goodbye. Story 2. He stole my family's inheritance. I stole his future. Families can be complicated. Ours was no exception. Growing up in a small town in Oregon, I never thought my older cousin Tyler and I would become enemies. He was 5 years older than me, and when we were kids, he seemed larger than life, teaching me how to throw a baseball, sneaking me pieces of gum when my mom wasn't looking, even letting me tag along when he went fishing with his dad. But as adults, Tyler changed. Or maybe I finally saw the side of him my parents always warned me about. When my grandfather passed away in 2022, he left behind a modest estate, a cozy 2-story home on the edge of town, a small savings account, and a dusty old Ford truck he'd restored himself. Grandpa had been careful. He made it clear in his will that everything was to be split equally between his 3 children, my mom, my uncle, and my aunt. But Tyler had other plans. You see, Tyler's dad, my uncle, died a few years earlier, and Tyler thought that meant he was entitled to his father's share, not split among him and his siblings, not divided fairly. All of it. At first, no one took him seriously. My mom and aunt even tried to reason with him. "Tyler," my mom said gently, "you'll still get part of your father's share, but this was Grandpa's wish. It's written down." But Tyler wouldn't hear it. He hired a lawyer and contested the will, dragging us all into months of legal battles we couldn't afford. By the time the dust settled, Tyler had managed to get his hands on almost everything, claiming Grandpa had promised him the house and truck in private conversations. Without clear documentation to counter him, the court sided with him. My mom was devastated. "This wasn't what Dad wanted," she whispered one night as we sat on her porch. "That house was supposed to be for all of us, for the grandkids to visit, for family holidays. He took it all, and we can't even fight anymore." I hated seeing her like that, so I decided to do something about it. I wasn't reckless about it. At 27, I was working in cybersecurity for a mid-sized firm. I knew how to dig around online without leaving traces. Tyler, on the other hand, wasn't exactly tech-savvy. He'd inherited Grandpa's house, yes, but he also inherited something else. Grandpa's habit of writing everything down. The first crack in Tyler's armor came when I found an old email address he still used. He'd linked it to dozens of accounts, streaming services, shopping sites, even some banking alerts. Most people reuse passwords, and Tyler was no exception. A little sleuthing revealed that he used variations of his high school football jersey number as his password. Rookie mistake. I didn't touch his bank accounts. That would have been too obvious and illegal. But I learned enough to know Tyler was over-leveraged. He'd taken out loans against Grandpa's house to fund a new trucking business, a business he ran under his own name without an LLC to shield him from liability. The opportunity came when I stumbled across a complaint thread online. A client had accused Tyler of stiffing them on a delivery contract, something about missing shipments and refusing to refund their deposit. That's when I realized Tyler wasn't just greedy, he was sloppy. I reached out to the client anonymously, offering to share what I knew about Tyler's operation. "I can't say who I am," I wrote in the email, "but you should know his trucks aren't insured properly. If you sue, he won't have a legal leg to stand on." They didn't reply, but 2 weeks later, I saw it, a lawsuit filed against Tyler's business. It didn't stop there. Using public records and a little creative nudging, I tipped off a local journalist about unsafe practices at Tyler's trucking company. A week later, a story ran in the local paper. New business faces questions over licensing, safety concerns. That alone would have been enough to make Tyler sweat. But the final blow came from the IRS. You see, Tyler had been skimming cash payments and underreporting his income, a fact he bragged about on an old Facebook post I found, thinking only his friends could see it. I sent an anonymous tip to the IRS with screenshots. By the end of the year, Tyler's world was crumbling. He lost the lawsuit, defaulted on his loans, and had to sell Grandpa's house to cover his debts. The IRS hit him with penalties so steep he had to shut down the trucking business entirely. The Ford truck, repossessed. I never told my mom what I'd done. She'd raised me to be kind, to forgive, to let karma handle things. But sometimes karma needs a little push. The last I heard, Tyler moved into a dingy apartment across town, working nights as a bartender. He still hasn't spoken to anyone in the family. And you know what? That's fine. Because as I sat on my mom's porch again, watching her smile as we planned Thanksgiving dinner, I realized revenge doesn't always have to feel explosive or loud. Sometimes it's quiet. And sometimes it feels like peace. Story 3. My mother-in-law tried to name my baby after herself, so I walked away. Mother-in-laws are tricky. At least, that's what people told me when I got married. But I thought I'd lucked out with Marion, my husband's mom. She was one of those women who wore perfectly pressed linen shirts and spoke in a voice so sugary sweet it made your teeth hurt. I mistook that sweetness for kindness. I learned better the year I got pregnant. My husband Ben and I had been married for 4 years when we found out we were expecting. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, in a little 2-bedroom house with creaky hardwood floors and a backyard big enough for a garden. From the moment we shared the news with Marion, she acted like it was her pregnancy. "Oh, my grandbaby!" she squealed on the phone. "I already know this child is going to be my little angel." At first, I thought it was cute. She showed up at our house with bags of baby clothes and started knitting pastel blankets. I brushed off the little comments, like when she suggested I stop eating so much dairy because it might make the baby colicky, or when she sent me links to articles about how C-sections ruin bonding. Ben saw the red flags before I did. "She's trying to control everything," he warned one night as we lay in bed, his hand resting on my growing belly. "You need to set boundaries, babe." "I will," I murmured, but I didn't. Not then. The trouble started when we found out the baby was a girl. Marion was ecstatic. "You know," she said during brunch one Sunday, stirring her coffee with unnecessary force, "if you're looking for names, Marion would be beautiful." Ben and I exchanged a glance. "Thanks," I said carefully. "But we've already picked a name. Hazel. We both love it." Marion's face stiffened. Hazel sounds old-fashioned. Marion is timeless." I laughed nervously. "We like Hazel." But Marion didn't drop it. Over the next few weeks, she became obsessed. She mailed us monogrammed onesies with M embroidered on them. She cornered Ben at his office, begging him to talk some sense into me. She even started referring to the baby as Little Marion in her Facebook posts. By my 8th month, I was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. "Ben," I said one night as I folded yet another pink blanket Marion had sent, "what if she doesn't stop? What if she tries to override us at the hospital?" Ben took my hands. "She won't," he promised. "I'll handle it." Then came the day of Hazel's birth. Labor was long, 13 hours of pain and fear and joy. And then finally, she was here, tiny and perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and wide gray eyes. Marion barged into the hospital room before I'd even held my daughter for an hour. "Oh, there's my baby girl," she gushed, swooping toward the bassinet. "Our baby girl," Ben said firmly, stepping between them. She ignored him. "So, have you filled out the birth certificate yet?" she asked, her voice tight with expectation. "Yes," I said, my voice hoarse. "Her name is Hazel Rose." Marion's smile faltered. No, you don't mean that. That's just a placeholder, right? You're going to honor family tradition. You're going to give her my name." I stared at her, too tired to mask my anger. "She's our daughter. We chose her name together. It's Hazel." Marion's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "This is my granddaughter. She should carry my legacy." Ben's voice was quiet but steady. "Mom, you need to leave." Marion's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You're kicking me out?" she whispered. "Yes," Ben said. "Until you can respect our decisions, you're not welcome here." It's been 2 years. Marion didn't come to the hospital after that. She didn't visit our home. For a while, she didn't call or text at all. Then, on Hazel's first birthday, a card arrived in the mail. To my sweet Marion, it read, "We didn't reply. Hazel is thriving. She loves blueberries, giggles uncontrollably when Ben lifts her onto his shoulders, and falls asleep every night, clutching our favorite stuffed fox. And every time I whisper her name, Hazel Rose, I remember that moment in the hospital when I finally stood my ground. For the first time, I chose myself. I chose my family. And it feels like freedom." Story 4. I still love my high school crush, and I'm married. This isn't something I've ever said out loud. Not to my wife, not to my therapist, not even to my closest friends. But sometimes, at night, when the house is quiet and my wife's breathing is soft and steady beside me, I think about her, my high school crush. It's been more than 15 years, but her name still lingers in a dusty corner of my mind like a dog-eared book I never finished. Her name was Emily. We met in 10th grade English, assigned as partners for a poetry analysis project. She was the kind of girl you noticed, not because she was loud or conventionally popular, but because there was something magnetic about her. She always wore her dark hair, tied up in a messy bun, with little wisps falling loose around her face. Her notebooks were covered in doodles of flowers and lyrics from bands I'd never heard of. In her laugh, it had this way of filling a room, bubbling up in a way that made everyone else smile too. I wasn't popular, not even close. I was lanky, awkward, the kid who spent lunch breaks sketching in the corner of the cafeteria or listening to obscure indie bands on my battered iPod. But Emily talked to me like I mattered. We'd meet at the library after school to work on our project, but more often than not, we'd get sidetracked. "You don't actually like T.S. Eliot, do you?" she teased one afternoon, her voice low so the librarian wouldn't shush us. I shrugged. "He's fine. I mean, he's no death cab for cutie." Her eyes lit up. "Wait, you like Death Cab?" It turned out we had overlapping playlists, favorite authors, and a shared disdain for our little Pennsylvania town. "I swear, if I stay here after graduation, I'll lose my mind," she said once, picking at the frayed hem of her hoodie sleeve. "Same," I admitted. "It feels like the kind of place that traps you. Then promise me something." "What?" "When we get out, we don't look back. We don't let this place eat us alive." I smiled. "Deal." There were moments, tiny, quiet ones, that felt like they meant more. Like when she brushed her hand against mine while reaching for her coffee, and neither of us pulled away. Or the night we watched an old black and white movie at her house, sitting so close our shoulders touched. Halfway through, she rested her head on my shoulder. My heart pounded so hard I was sure she could hear it. I wanted to say something, to tell her how I felt, but I didn't. Senior year, Emily started dating a guy from the soccer team, Dylan Matthews. He was confident, handsome, the kind of guy who seemed to glide through life without effort. I told myself I was happy for her. That spring, she came to school wearing his Letterman jacket, her eyes brighter than I'd ever seen them. At graduation, we hugged, and she whispered, "Don't let this town eat you alive." I watched her walk away across the football field, tassel swinging, and I told myself it didn't hurt. But it did. Life moved on. I went to college in Chicago, threw myself into my marketing degree, and slowly grew into my own skin. I met Allison at a friend's barbecue. She was funny, self-assured, and had this way of making everyone feel at ease. When I was with her, I didn't think about Emily. We dated for 3 years, got married in a small ceremony in the spring. Allison's mom cried through the whole thing. We bought a little house in the suburbs, adopted a golden retriever named Murphy, and started talking about kids. I thought I'd close that chapter of my life. Then, last month, on a random Tuesday, I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw her. Emily. Same soft smile. 2 kids. A husband standing beside her in the family photo, his arm wrapped around her waist. She looked happy. Since then, I can't stop thinking about her. Not in a sexual way, though she's still beautiful, but in a what-if way. What if I told her how I felt? What if we'd gone to the same college? What if she'd been the one standing beside me in that white dress? Allison doesn't know. I can't tell her. She's been my rock through everything. The late nights at work, my dad's health scare, the little moments that make a life together. And yet, there's this tiny, nagging part of me that wonders if I settled. Not for Allison. She's incredible. But for the version of myself that never took risks. The version of me that stayed quiet when my heart was screaming. I haven't reached out to Emily. I never will. I don't want to hurt my wife. I don't want to disrupt Emily's life either. But late at night, when Murphy is curled up at my feet and Allison's soft breaths fill the room, I think about her. And I wonder if she ever thinks about me too. Story 5. The little girl on my street saved my life without even knowing it. I've never been the type of person to make friends easily. At 42, I thought I'd grown used to my own company. I told myself I liked the quiet, that I preferred it. Wake up, brew coffee, drive to work, come home, heat up leftovers, watch TV, scroll through my phone until my eyelids drooped. Repeat. It wasn't a bad life, I told myself. Just simple. But during the winter of last year, as the snow piled high outside and the nights stretched on endlessly, I started to realize how lonely I'd become. It started with little cracks in my routine. One evening, I stayed late at the office, long after the janitorial staff had gone home. I sat staring at spreadsheets that blurred together, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the empty space. My coworkers all had families to rush home to, kids with messy hair, spouses texting reminders to pick up milk, dogs waiting at the door. Me? I went home to an empty house. The next morning, I sat in my car, outside the parking garage for 15 minutes. Gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles ached, trying to summon the energy to go inside. It was getting harder to pretend I was okay. Then came the day I met Sophie. It was a Sunday afternoon. The kind of cold where the air felt like knives against your cheeks, and even the birds had gone silent. I was out front shoveling snow from my walkway, bundled up in my old navy parka, my breath fogging in the icy air. "Hi." The voice startled me. I turned and saw her, a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, standing at the edge of my driveway. She was wearing a bright pink coat with fluffy mittens and snow boots that looked 2 sizes too big. "Hi," I said, surprised. "I'm Sophie. We live over there." She pointed across the street at a 2-story house with a wreath on the door and a snowman in the yard missing its carrot nose. "Nice to meet you, Sophie. I'm Mark." She smiled shyly and kicked at a clump of snow. "Your snowman fell down," she said matter-of-factly. I followed her gaze. Sure enough, the lopsided snowman I'd built on a whim last week had collapsed into an unrecognizable heap. "Yeah," I admitted. "Guess I'm not a very good snowman builder." Sophie giggled. "It's okay. I can help you make a new one." And just like that, Sophie became a regular part of my afternoons. She'd knock on my door after school, her pink cheeks flushed from the cold, asking if I wanted to come outside. Sometimes we'd build snowmen. Other times we'd just walk around the block with her chattering about her favorite cartoons, her best friend Mia, and the puppy her parents promised to get her for her birthday. She had a way of filling the air with energy, like the world was bigger and brighter when she was around. For the first time in months, I felt lighter. One Saturday, Sophie showed up with construction paper and markers. "What's all this?" I asked, as she plopped the supplies on my kitchen table. "We're making Valentines," she announced, "for everyone on the street. You have to make at least 5. I laughed. 5? That's a lot. "You can do it," she said with a grin. So I sat there, carefully folding paper and writing messages in loopy, uneven handwriting. It felt silly, but it also felt good. One day, as we were stacking snowballs for yet another snowman, Sophie looked up at me with wide eyes. "Why don't you have kids?" I hesitated, caught off guard. "Just didn't happen," I said finally. "That's okay," she said matter-of-factly. "You can still be my friend." A few weeks later, Sophie's mom, Sarah, stopped by. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, shifting a grocery bag to her other hip. "Sophie loves spending time with you, and honestly, I think you've been really good for her. She's been happier since we moved here." "Funny," I said. "I was going to say the same thing about her." Sarah smiled warmly. "Well, I'm glad you're a part of her little world." I don't know if Sophie sensed how dark things had been for me before she showed up. I don't know if she could tell how much her simple presence, the knock on my door, the silly conversations about snowmen and cartoons, pulled me back from the edge. But she saved me without even knowing it. Now, when I wake up in the morning, there's a different kind of weight in my chest. Not the crushing kind, but the kind that reminds me I'm still here. That people, even small ones, can make all the difference. And every time I see Sophie waving at me from across the street, pink coat flapping in the wind, I wave back. Because she doesn't know it yet. But she gave me a reason to stay. Story 6. My boss told me to do it his way. So I did, and it cost him everything. Working in corporate America, you quickly learn the unwritten rules. The politics, the power plays, and especially how to survive when the person at the top insists they always know best. For 3 years, I was a project coordinator at a mid-sized marketing firm in Denver. Not the dream job, but it paid the bills, and I enjoyed the routine, the steady flow of emails, the hum of office life, and the occasional coffee break. My boss, Greg, was a different story. He was the kind of man who filled the room with his presence, loud, commanding, and convinced that micromanagement was the only path to success. Our latest project was a campaign for a local tech startup launching a new app. The deadline was tight, the budget modest, and the stakes high enough to make everyone a little tense. Greg took control early. Every email, every graphic, every social media post had to be approved by him. His word was law. The team grumbled quietly. Deadlines stretched as we waited on his approval for the smallest changes. Productivity slowed, but Greg waved off concerns. "Trust me," he'd say, voice booming in meetings. "Control is everything." One afternoon, I noticed a glaring error on the key graphic for the campaign. The product name was misspelled, an obvious mistake that could undermine the whole launch. I brought it up with Greg. "Don't worry about it," he snapped. "It's not a big deal. Fix it after launch." I was stunned, but didn't argue. It was his project. Launch day arrived. The emails went out, social posts went live, the graphics were plastered across every platform. Within hours, the startup's social media channels flooded, not with praise, but with complaints. Customers pointed out the typo. Memes mocking the mistake went viral. Confidence in the app faltered. Sales stalled. Greg was furious. "Why didn't you fix the typo before launch?" he demanded in the next meeting. "I told you to wait," I reminded him calmly. He stormed out, leaving the team scrambling to manage the fallout. But then, Greg doubled down. He announced a new strategy. From now on, every campaign would be run exactly his way, with no input from anyone else. If you want to keep your jobs, you'll follow my instructions to the letter. That's when I decided to comply. Completely. For the next month, I did exactly what Greg said. When he told me to schedule meetings at 7 a.m., I sent the invites. When he insisted on triple approvals for the smallest emails, I enforced the process. When he demanded we use outdated software because it's what's always worked, I blocked requests for new tools. Every rule he made, every inefficient process he demanded, I followed perfectly. Slowly, the department ground to a halt. Clients grew frustrated with delays, budgets spiraled out of control, morale plummeted. The once bustling office became quiet, tense, filled with sighs and whispered complaints. One afternoon, the CEO called an emergency meeting. The executive team reviewed the data, the missed deadlines, the client emails, the budget overruns. The verdict was clear. Productivity was tanking, and Greg's management style was the cause. Within 2 weeks, Greg was gone. A new manager arrived, someone who listened, trusted the team, and valued efficiency over ego. And me? I kept doing my job. But now with the freedom to do it right. Sometimes the best revenge is quiet. Sometimes it's just following orders, exactly as given, until the system breaks. Story 7. I effed up today by confronting my wife after finding out she cheated with almost everyone I know. I never thought I'd find myself in this position, sitting alone in the quiet of my living room, the clock ticking too loudly, replaying the worst day of my life like a broken record. The kind of day that changes everything and leaves you wondering if anything will ever be the same. My name's Mark. I'm 34 years old, married to Jenna for nearly 5 years. We met back in college during a creative writing class. A random seating chart put us side by side. She was vivacious, charming, the kind of person who lit up the room with her laugh. I was quiet, a bit awkward, but drawn to her energy like a moth to a flame. We clicked immediately. Our first conversation lasted hours. We traded favorite books, music, and childhood memories. I remember thinking, maybe this is what people mean by love at first sight. After graduation, we moved into a modest apartment just outside Chicago. We built a life filled with weekend brunches, late-night movies, dog walks with Max, our golden retriever, and endless talks about our dreams. She was my best friend. Or at least, I thought she was. I want to tell you about today, the day everything cracked wide open. It began with a text from my brother Mike, just a few hours before Jenna came home from work. We need to talk. It's about Jenna. The text was brief but heavy. My stomach churned. I stared at my phone, heart pounding, mind racing through every possible nightmare. I called Mike immediately. Mike was nervous, hesitant, but finally told me what he found. A series of messages on Jenna's phone between her and several men I knew. Mike himself, Jason from my softball league, Steve from work, and others. I tried to shut it out, told myself it was a misunderstanding, a mistake. But then came the photos, screenshots of flirty texts, pictures I never wanted to see, proof that shattered everything. The hours until Jenna got home were the longest of my life. I sat on the edge of the couch, gripping the armrest so tightly my knuckles turned white. Max rested his head on my lap, sensing my anxiety but unable to offer comfort. When Jenna finally walked in, I looked up at her and felt like I was seeing a stranger. "Is it true?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Her face froze. She hesitated, then denied it. Said I was imagining things. But I showed her the messages. The photos. She didn't deny it then. She broke down and confessed. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run. Instead, I felt numb. The first thing I did wrong was confront her in front of our closest friends that very evening. We were hosting a small dinner, our way to unwind after a long week. When I pulled her aside and laid it all out, the betrayal, the lies, the room went silent. Her eyes filled with tears. Mine did too. But I was angry. So angry. I shouted, accused, called her names I wish I could take back. The friends we trusted looked on, horrified and silent. She left that night and hasn't returned home yet. Now, I sit here, replaying every moment of the day, every word, every reaction. Was I justified in losing control? Did I make things worse by confronting her so publicly? I think back to the good times, the laughter, the plans, the quiet Sunday mornings, wrapped in blankets on the couch. And I wonder how much of it was real and how much was just a lie I told myself to keep going. I know this is messy. I know there are no easy answers. But I also know this. Today, I effed up. I let my anger drown out everything else. I don't know if I'm the victim or if I'm just as broken as this marriage now. I don't know what comes next. All I can do is breathe and try to find a way forward. Story 8. The entitled mother who demanded my reserved table, so I turned her away. I work at a cozy, family-owned restaurant in a mid-sized town in Ohio. It's the kind of place where regular customers feel like family and everyone knows your name. The smells of fresh bread and simmering sauces fill the air, soft music hums in the background, and the chatter of diners mixes with the gentle clinking of silverware. Every Friday evening, the place buzzes with people coming to unwind after the work week. On this particular Friday, the dinner rush was winding down just as I was managing the reservations and seating guests. Just as I was preparing to sit a family at one of the tables near the fireplace, the phone rang. On the other end was a woman whose tone immediately set off alarm bells. She spoke loudly and quickly, clearly expecting special treatment. "I want the best table in the house," she said, "the one by the window. I'm coming for a special occasion, and I expect it to be reserved." I smiled politely, trying to keep my tone even and professional. "I'm so sorry, ma'am, but all our prime window tables are fully booked tonight. Reservations were made weeks ago." There was a pause. Then she insisted, "That's ridiculous. I'm a paying customer, and I deserve to be seated where I want." I offered alternatives gently. "We do have some lovely tables near the fireplace or in the corner that are available. I'd be happy to reserve one of those for you." But she wasn't satisfied. Her voice rose with entitlement as she argued, "No, I want the table by the window. Make it happen." I explained again that our reservation policy means those tables were already promised to other guests. I assured her she'd have a wonderful experience at any other table. The conversation grew tense. She threatened to leave a bad review if I didn't comply. I stayed calm and polite, thanking her for her understanding while continuing to assist other guests. About 20 minutes later, she arrived in person. Her presence was commanding a sharply dressed woman with an air of impatience. She marched right up to me, arms crossed. "I want the table by the window," she said firmly. I greeted her with a warm smile. "Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. As I mentioned on the phone, the window tables are reserved, but I have a lovely table right by the fireplace ready for you." She huffed and frowned. "I don't want the fireplace. I want the window. It's unacceptable." I took a deep breath. It's rare for me to be firm with customers, but I knew this was the moment. "I'm very sorry, ma'am, but we can't accommodate requests that don't follow our reservation policy. If you're not willing to take a table that's available, I won't be able to seat you tonight." Her face twisted in surprise. She blinked, clearly not expecting me to stand my ground. For a few seconds, she looked like she might argue, but instead, she turned and stormed out. After she left, I took a moment to steady myself. It's never easy to turn a customer away, but I knew I'd handled it respectfully and calmly. The rest of the evening went smoothly. Regulars enjoyed their meals and shared smiles. I even received texts from some who had overheard the situation, thanking me for keeping the restaurant a welcoming place for everyone. Dealing with entitlement is tough, especially when it threatens the experience of other guests. But sometimes, standing firm calmly and politely is the best way to protect the space we work hard to maintain. Story 9. How I outsmarted the boss who tried to steal my credit and saved my career. I've worked in advertising for nearly a decade, mostly behind the scenes, planning campaigns, coordinating teams, and making sure everything runs smoothly. I'm not the loudest voice in the room, but I take pride in my work and the small victories that come from careful effort. A couple of years ago, I landed a job at a fast-growing agency in Austin, Texas. It was a dream move, better pay, exciting clients, and a chance to finally lead projects on my own. Early on, I was assigned to lead a major campaign for a new client, a local craft brewery launching a series of seasonal beers. The project was complex, with tight deadlines and high expectations. My boss, Todd, was charming on the surface. The kind of guy who smiled in meetings and called you partner. But he had a habit of taking credit for other people's work. At first, I brushed it off as just office politics. One afternoon, I presented the final campaign plan to Todd. I spent hours perfecting every detail, the messaging, the visuals, the timeline. I expected him to review it and give me feedback. Instead, the next day, Todd shared the plan at an executive meeting as if it was entirely his idea. No mention of work, no credit given. I felt blindsided, but instead of confronting him immediately, I decided to be smart about it. I started documenting everything. Emails, drafts, meeting notes. I saved every piece of evidence showing my involvement. Then, I quietly rallied a few trusted colleagues who had seen the project from the beginning. They confirmed my role and agreed to back me up if needed. Weeks went by. Todd continued trying to take credit for other projects, but I stayed calm, patient, and meticulous. Finally, during a high-stakes client presentation, I was asked detailed questions about the campaign's strategy. Todd fumbled. I answered confidently, showing deep knowledge and preparation. Afterward, the client's executive director pulled me aside and said, "You really know your stuff. I want to make sure the team recognizes your hard work." That was the turning point. I arranged a private meeting with HR, presented my evidence, and shared my colleagues' testimonials. HR launched an investigation. Todd was reprimanded and eventually moved to a different department with less client contact. More importantly, I earned respect within the agency. My career took off, and I was given bigger, better projects. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud or aggressive. It's quiet, careful, and smart, letting your work speak for itself, and having the patience to see justice done. Story 10. How helping a stranger in need changed my entire week. I live in a small town in Vermont, where the air is crisp and fresh, especially in the early mornings, when the sun has just started to warm the sleepy streets. It's the kind of place where neighbors still greet each other with a smile and a nod, and the pace of life feels unhurried, like the gentle flow of the nearby river. One chilly autumn afternoon, wrapped in my favorite thick scarf and coat, I set out on a walk to the local grocery store. The sidewalks were covered in crunchy fallen leaves, their golden hues dancing in the soft breeze. My boots tapped steadily on the pavement as I enjoyed the peaceful rhythm of the day. As I neared the corner cafe, the smell of fresh coffee and baked pastries drifting through the air, I noticed an elderly woman sitting alone on a worn wooden bench just outside. She held a small, faded purse tightly in her trembling hands and seemed unsure, her gaze flicking toward the street and back to the ground beneath her feet. I slowed my pace, concern growing in my chest. Something about her looked fragile, like she might need a little help. "Excuse me, ma'am," I said gently, stopping a few feet away. "Are you okay? Do you need some help?" She looked up slowly, her eyes kind but weary, and gave me a faint smile. "I'm trying to find the bus stop," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of uncertainty. I glanced around. The bus stop was just a little further down the road, but the cold wind was beginning to pick up, and the next bus wasn't scheduled to arrive for another 20 minutes. The bench she was sitting on was exposed, offering little protection from the chilly breeze. "Would you like to wait inside the cafe with me? It's warm in there, and we can get some tea while we wait for your bus," I offered. Her face brightened just a bit, and she nodded gratefully. Together, we walked inside the cozy cafe, greeted by the comforting aroma of coffee beans and freshly baked cinnamon rolls. The soft murmur of conversation and gentle clinking of cups filled the space. We found a small table by the window, where the late afternoon sunlight spilled in, casting long golden streaks across the floor. I ordered us both a cup of tea, the steam curling upward like little whispers of warmth. As we sipped, she introduced herself as Margaret. She told me she was visiting her daughter who lived a few towns over and had gotten a bit turned around while running errands. The soft lines around her eyes deepened as she smiled, sharing stories of her grandchildren and the small joys of her daily life. Our conversation drifted gently between topics: the changing seasons, favorite books, and the simple pleasures that bring comfort during difficult times. I found myself listening intently, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the tea. Time slipped away quietly until the distant rumble of a bus approaching outside brought us back to the present. I stood with her, walking to the bus stop and watching as the bus rolled to a stop, its doors opening with a soft hiss. Margaret turned to me and said, "Thank you for your kindness. It means more than you know." Her words settled in my chest like a soft blanket. That small act of kindness, the decision to stop, to listen, to share warmth on a cold day, changed my entire week. In the days that followed, I noticed the world differently. The way sunlight filtered through amber leaves, the cheerful chatter of children playing in the park, the comforting hum of familiar routines, all seemed somehow brighter. Sometimes, it's the smallest moments of connection that remind us of the goodness in the world and the power we each have to make a difference. If you're still awake, thank you for spending your time with us. We'd love to have you back tomorrow night, so go ahead and subscribe. Tap, like if this video helped you unwind. And let us know in the comments what kind of stories help you fall asleep. Sleep well. See you in the next one.